Hey guys, today we'll take a look at a rogue build for Season 6 Diablo 4. I can't believe that I left this game about a year ago and rogues are still some of the top DPS options still to this day. And we have a new option that works really great, which is the brand new Dance of Knives ability, an amazing AoE that just clears out entire group of enemies, goes in and breezes through dungeons, and it's both amazing in the leveling stage as well as once you jump into the higher torment tiers. So starting things off, the brand new ability is going to be our main source of damage. We're just going to channel this, so you will hold this down, spin continuously, and absolutely destroy enemies. Plus, with aspects like the star shards, we're going to make it even stronger so that every single of those knife hits are going to split into even more knives so that it hits even more enemies. Plus, we can use imbuements. You can either go with poison/shadow in the early stages and then transition to cold imbuement once you reach level 60 and get your Paragon Boards going. So let's go over the skill tree right here, and as well as the skills that are down the line. We're going to now make use of the blade shift, going with the primary blade shift upgrade right here, since it gives us a bit of, extra just resistances in general to all elements. Plus, since this is a cutthroat ability, it doesn't interfere at all with our stacks of momentum like how something like Puncture does in the new patch. We're not going to use anything in the next category of the core. Instead, we're going to go with the Sturdy, which reduces some of the incoming damage, and especially Siphoning Strikes, Lucky Hit, Critical Strikes against close enemies have an 85% chance to heal us for 3% of the maximum HP, which is an amazing way to just sustain your HP and heal yourself as you hit a ton of enemies. In the next category, we're going to go with our Cutthroat, and this time around we have the Dance of Knives, and we're going to go with this upgrade right here, the Disciplined Dance of Knives, which is also going to slow down enemies. So that provides crowd control, and we're going to further increase damage versus some of the crowd control effects as well. In terms of other abilities here, for just gap closing purposes or moving easier on the map, I went with the dash as well as the methodical dash so that we have multiple charges of it and just basically spam this as we're going from group to group when we don't have anything else in between. I'm also going with the Caltrops. Caltrops can be very good, and you can definitely go with the Disciplined Caltrops so that you can increase critical strike chance when enemies are inside of them. It can be quite useful against bosses or enemies that have a lot of HP, or open world events like bosses and whatnot, so definitely works really great. Beyond this, also these 3 or 4 abilities. So we have the Weapon Mastery, which will further increase our damage with the weapons that we use, especially daggers and swords. I'm also Unstable Elixirs. Using healing potions increases our damage by 18% and stuns enemies. Plus, we can now do it while we channel, so we can just do this while in the middle of Dance of Knives. That's actually really amazing. Trick attacks, which further helps with a bit of extra damage, critical strike, and all of that. And finally, Balestra, you gain increased damage for 4 seconds after evading, so you might do evades every now and then. It can help to stack up even more damage. I also like Rapid Gambits, about 1 point over here, since that's going to just daze targets as we hit them, and that's going to help us reduce the cooldown on evade as well. Now, in the Subterfuge category, we have a couple of really awesome options, and one of them is going to be Concealment. I would say absolutely mandatory for this build because of the Subverting Concealment. So basically, it guarantees critical strikes if you hit enemies when you break Concealment. So you can just, for example, go invisible with Concealment and immediately activate Dance of Knives out of it, and you're going to instantly one-shot everything because you're doing those massive critical hits. Plus, the cooldown on it is not too big. We're going to max out the points over here so that we can reduce it even more. Another thing I recommend is also Dark Shroud. We're not going to use it on the active skill bar, but because we used the Umbrous aspect, this is going to help a ton to just survive, get a bit of extra resistances, damage reduction, and of course, every time it removes one of these Dark Shrouds, we also get healed. So that's why I'm going with the Subverting upgrade at the bottom. Beyond this, also picking Exploit, increasing damage to healthy and injured enemies, and Malice, like pretty much most of the builds out there, will use these 2 passives as well. Moving on to imbuements, we kind of have a couple of options. So in the leveling stage, you can definitely go with the Shadow imbuement and the Poison imbuement. One for AoE, like large groups of enemies, hell tides and whatnot, or even dungeons. And then the Poison, keeping it for single target boss DPS. It works really great. You can definitely push through with it. Later on, you kind of have a couple of options. You can either just focus on Poison instead, since it's going to give you more DPS, or go with a different route this time around. I played with the cold imbuement and I really liked it. You can go with the mixed cold upgrade, which is going to increase the damage versus crowd control, which, by the way, all enemies will be crowd controlled because of the Dance of Knives, and also frigid finesse, which further increases damage against chilled enemies, even more if they are frozen. So this happens very often. We have other things in the Paragon board, as well as some of the other abilities over there that will buff damage versus chilled enemies. So this I found to work really great all the way until like Torment 3. That's where I kind of stopped, at least in my time with the expansion. Now in the ultimate category, we're not gonna really pick anything. You can definitely go with the death trap and kind of mix a build with that, but for this I just wanted to keep it simple, and instead I'm going with impetus, a very important one to have. After moving 15 meters, your next core or ultimate skill will deal 24% increased damage, and while the damage bonus is active, your basic agility and subterfuge skills deal 15% damage. But we don't really use any ultimates or core, so that buff, that 15% buff actually lingers until we use an agility or subterfuge skill. And guess what? The Dance of Knives is an agility skill, so it fully benefits from that extra damage as we just move along. That is really cool. Now in the capstone or key passive, we go with momentum. Now I believe this has been somewhat nerfed from how it was before, or let me know down in the comments because I kind of skipped a few seasons. But now it gives you like up to 30% of that damage, max energy, damage reduction, and so on and so forth. The change over here is that it kind of removes stacks if you cast marksman skills. That's why we removed that puncture, but we're not going to worry about it with this build. We don't really cast any marksman skills at all with this build, so we're constantly going to get this, plus we're going to use some of those aspects to further buff our damage when we have maximum momentum. So let's go over the skills themselves, including some of our best options. And I'm going to start things off right here. One of them that we're going to use is obviously going to be the new aspect of the Star Shard. So this is going to make Dance of Knives have a pretty big chance, like 50% chance to shatter into 6 shards. That's, also just jump into multiple directions. That's how you're going to spread all of that damage to multiple targets. Also grants 3 additional charges if you want to go, in this case, with the combo point specialization, but we're not going to make use of that. We're going to obviously use the inner sight. That is the superior option over here. Another one is going to be the aspect of True Sight. So we're going to deal increased critical strike damage to enemies marked by inner sight. So while inner sight is full, we also gain a lot, like 30% at max increased damage, which is really awesome. This absolutely melts bosses too, since they are the only target. Also, I like aspect of synergy. So when we use agility skills, like in this case, Dance of Knives, reduce the cooldown of your next subterfuge skill. So that would be concealment. But if we use the subterfuge skill, increase the damage of your next agility skill by up to 55%. So obviously, when you break concealment, between the fact that it's a guaranteed critical chance, now you also have increased damage for the Dance of Knives, which is really awesome. And besides that, one more thing I really like using is the aspect of Stolen Vigor. While at maximum stacks of momentum, key passive, your cutthroat skills deal up to like 50% increased damage, and you become unstoppable for 3 seconds every few seconds. But Dance of Knives is also a cutthroat skill, so it greatly benefits from this as well. Now, besides this, there are a few more things I recommend, such as the Umbrous aspect. You can put it on the pants, for example, so you're going to have a chance to gain the free Dark Shroud Shadows without having that on the skill bar, so you get all of the benefits from it. I'm also going with the Fists of Fate for that random chance for like 300% of the normal damage. I'm also going with aspect of Concussive Strikes. Damaging enemies has a chance to daze them, and you deal increased damage against dazed targets. Plus, we also get to use this skill right here, the rapid gambits, which also has a chance to daze enemies as you hit them with your knives. And anything else that just protects you a lot more, like Aspect of Disobedience. Also Penitent Greaves works really well here because it just increases your damage versus chilled. And again, you chill enemies a lot with this. And like I said, very easy to farm in the Undercity. So check out the gearing guide that I also covered. Now let's jump over the Paragon on a final note. So here is the full on build layout. You're going to also have the link down below towards it. But in the first one, I'm going with versatility, non-basic, non-core skills, deal 25% increased damage. So that's basically going to be our Dance of Knives. That is a non-core and it's a non-basic skill. So that's going to increase that damage even more. Next, Paragon board. Again, I wanted to make use of all the cool new stuff, so I went with the Dance Macabre, Paragon board, and also because the legendary Dance Macabre gives you like casting mobility and subterfuge skills to increase the damage of your next skill by 50%. That is why we also incorporated a dash, do a dash, jump in, pull a concealment, and you have all of those bonuses to your Dance of Knives. And in this case, I'm going with fluidity in terms of our glyph. When we cast an agility skill, we deal increased damage and gain increased energy regen for 5 seconds. Helps a ton with that. The next board is going to be Eldritch Bounty, and we use the control glyph. Control just deals damage, higher damage to slowed or chilled enemies, which guess what? We're going to slow and chill enemies all the freaking time. Plus, of course, the Eldritch Bounty itself, which just increases our max resistances and damage with the imbuement element that we use. So in this case, that's going to be the Frost one. Third Paragon board is going to be Cheap Shot with the Devious glyph. Devious just increases the damage against CC'd enemies by up to like 10%. It's like a stacking buff. So yeah, it's going to go up to 10% once you hit them a few times. Plus, of course, we also have the legendary node over here, increase damage for each nearby enemy that is CC'd up to 25%. A nearby staggered boss provides the maximum bonus. So that's going to be active pretty much almost all the time. In the final category, we have Exploit Weakness, and we use the Headhunter, which just increases damage against elites. Pretty awesome. Plus, of course, we can also use the Legendary Node, which is going to just make hitting vulnerable enemies to like have a really good solid chance that we deal extra damage. But that's going to be another stacking buff that's going to last on you until it expires after like 6 seconds. So overall, pretty solid build. Of course, later on, once you really jump into mythicals, I believe this also works with the Andariel's helmet. I've definitely seen some pre-expansion release builds and people out there definitely making use of it and working really great. But this is going to get you started with the base stuff until you get everything sorted. So this is going to help you pre-level 60 and post-level 60 up until at least that Torment 3. And from that point on, from 3 to 4, I'm going to jump in with a separate video on a different version of this build later down the line. Let me know down below if you're also planning to main rogues yet again in Season 6 as well. It's going to be my second main after the Spiritborn, but I'm also curious to see what you guys are going to do as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.